Hey everybody, it's Eric Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts.
Hello, everybody. This is Village Global Venture Stories. I'm Anne Dwane, co-founder and partner, joined here today by Paul Martino of Bullpen Capital, who is himself a serial founder, as well as a founder of a VC firm about 10 years ago. They've just announced Fund 5 and added an amazing new partner, Anne. And we're going to dig in today to Paul's entrepreneurial stories, his lessons for entrepreneurs, all about Bullpen Capital and their thesis and what it's like to work with them and pitch them. So now, without further ado, Paul, what drove the name choice of Bullpen Capital?
So that's a great opening question. And Anne, thanks so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. When we were starting the fund, the whole thesis behind the fund was we knew that there was going to be a gap between the seed and the Series A. We saw the explosion of seed funds. First round and Floodgate and, True was there early and Soft Tech. And we knew that was going to explode. And we kind of guessed that the Series A would stay the same. So there'd be this event horizon in between the seed and the Series A. We now call it post-seed. But when we were brainstorming this, we didn't have a name. And my partner, Rich Melman, who started Electronic Arts back in '82, we were in a meeting and he said, Paul, what we're doing is we're kind of building a bigger backstop for these companies. And so we kind of were thinking, okay, what's it like? So the next meeting we have is with this guy, Chad Durbin. Chad Durbin was the '08 World Series champion on the Philadelphia Phillies. He had the sports recruiting website called Showcase You Sports. He wanted to match high school students to scholarships for athletics. And we told him what we were doing. He's like, so you guys kind of do for the startups what I do for the starting pitcher, because he was a bullpen relief pitcher. And we're like, yeah, we should call it Bullpen because we're the bullpen for the startups. And that's literally how we got the name, because Chad happened to be the guy in our office as we were brainstorming.
Wow. That's a good serendipitous story. So now let's go way back. We'll come back to Bullpen, but let's go way back, maybe circa 2002 or so. Yep. And you had some ideas in social media. Tell us about working with Mark Pincus and Chris Law and Tribe. What was that about, and what did you learn?
So Tribe is the canonical successful failure story of Silicon Valley. We all lost all of our money. Make no mistake. It was a failure in that regard, but it was the successful failure. We were in the right pond. It led to the formation of Zynga. It led to the formation of Aggregate Knowledge, and God knows how many other social media companies that have now been formed after that. For example, one of my product managers at Aggregate Knowledge went on to form Scopely, the game company in LA. So the lineage of successful failure from Tribe is significant. What were we doing at Tribe? We knew that social networking would be a better way to solve problems. And Pincus's original idea was socially networked classifieds to take on Craigslist would be a great idea. Wouldn't you rather do business with someone who you knew who they were as opposed to the random person who shows up to your house with a check to buy your bike? And we never figured it out, right? We tried a bunch of times. And some things worked, some things didn't work. We became the Burning Man crowd. If you wanted to organize a group to go to Burning Man, Tribe was your place to go. But we ended up being a niche community. We never figured out the seed audience, but we knew so much about what was driving social media, why people went, how to target people. And so the targeting became Aggregate Knowledge. The what else to do became the games at Zynga. And so it was one of the most important things I did in my life, even though it was a failure.
Wow. Amazing story. Okay. So let's fast forward to Aggregate Knowledge, which was backed by Kleiner Perkins. Well done. So I guess that one was just going to be smooth sailing, right?
It wasn't quite. I will tell you, it started off charm, though. The first year or two, we couldn't have done it any better. We went from 2 people in a bedroom to a couple $1 million in revenue inside of a year. Life was easy. The original business model was using social kind of data to do better recommendations and personalization. And we landed the big accounts right out of the gate. Washington Post, the New York Times, Overstock on the commerce side. And it was just a charmed first year or two. And then quickly, oh crap, everyone can copy us really, really quickly. And boy, they did. And we went from being the only game in town to literally having a new competitor spring up every week. And we're like, oh, this is going to be a lot harder than we thought.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, you got a double whammy, which is up came the 2008 financial crisis.
Right. So 06 and 07, we could do no wrong in 06 and 07. So Tribe was 02 through 05. We started Aggregate Knowledge 06 and 07, charmed first 2 years. Great investors. Randy Komisar from Kleiner couldn't ask for a better investor. And then the wheels start coming off. Renewals are slow. The market is saturated. The competitors are showing up. All of a sudden, a product that I'm charging $1 million for, I can't get a $100,000 renewal. I go into a board meeting in January of 08. And I tell Randy, I say, Randy, it's not working. Like the first 2 years were a false positive. I'm sorry. And Randy told me, he's like, look, you're smart. You got a lot of money in the bank. We love your team. Go figure it out. And in that go figure it out 6 months is when the financial collapse happened in the summer of 08. And so we had the lucky break of no one caring about us. So the nice part, and we wrote this up and it got published, was the 08 recession basically saved the company because since everybody wrote us off and didn't care, we were given the extra time to figure out how to pivot the company into the advertising and targeting technology that we were great at. And it ultimately led to a great outcome. But if the 08 financial crisis hadn't happened and everyone forgot about us, the company probably would have gone under.
Wow. And so do you, when founders who are navigating 2020 with pandemic and all kinds of challenges, what kinds of advice do you give them?
I tell them that story. I go, listen, you have to play the hand you are dealt. And if the hand you are dealt is, wow, COVID has shut down all of my offices and I was going to open a brand new warehouse, but wait a minute, everyone's at home and can't wait to use my product. You got to go figure it out. Like my story was everyone forgot about my company, so I had time to reinvent myself. So you have to take this and view this as no matter how difficult or hard it is, it's an opportunity for you. You must look at it as an opportunity. You must figure out how to leverage it in some way. And yes, it's a horrible situation. People are dying. Restaurants are shutting down. Main Street is literally getting killed right now. I'm involved in a food and beverage project right now, and it is just depressing to work with people who are in that industry. Like in venture, it's great. We have a portfolio of risk, but if you own a single restaurant, that's your livelihood. That's your job. That's your career. That's your ego. So we are fortunate in the venture business that we can kind of reinvent ourselves so easily. So please take this as an opportunity to figure out how to make your business better on the backside of this. And it's a shame that a lot of non-venture businesses in Main Street don't have the opportunities that we do.
So now let's fast forward to 2010. Congratulations, you had a successful exit of Aggregate Knowledge to Newstar. Is that right? And but then it's 2010, and you're thinking about venture. And how was the ecosystem different than today?
So you got to remember, 2010, there are literally somewhere between 20 and 40 seed funds in the entire country. 20 to 40, that's it. I was an early LP in first round capital, so I got to watch that from the ground up. Very lucky break that I became an LP in like 2005 or so. And another funny Mark Pincus story. This guy named Mike Maples called in a favor to come to Silicon Valley from Austin. And Mark Pincus was supposed to spend the week playing tour guide to him. This is in the early, in the kind of wind down days of Tribe, the early days of Zynga and Aggregate Knowledge. Pincus calls me up and says, I don't know who this guy is. I'm going to Tahoe. Can you go meet him? And Mike and I have been best friends ever since. I was the lucky person to fill in for Mark. And, wow. And so when Mike was growing Floodgate, he asked me to become one of his partners. Ultimately, Anne became his partner and has been a great partnership. But he offered me the job. And I was like, I don't want to be a venture person. I'm going to go start my next company. He's like, no, Paul. You don't understand. The business is changing. There's me and there's Jeff Clavier and there's Koppelman, but this whole new wave is going to happen. You're a data science geek. You need to start thinking about venture because the whole industry is going to change over the next 5 years. And Mike was dead right. And we went from 20 to 40 to 200, and now we're over 1,000. And that's crazy.
That is amazing. So there's a parallel universe where you, Anne, and Mike were partners.
Yeah. No, and it was funny because I flat turned down. I told Mike, I said, Mike, you venture people are weenies. I don't want to do that. I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I'm not going to be a sellout. Like, I don't want to do it. But then what happened is he got me thinking about venture like an entrepreneur. Like, start from a blank sheet of paper. Don't just go build a fund. Like, what's broken in the business to fix? And that got me inspired, because if it was, I'm going to be a managing partner at a venture fund, I'd be like, oh my God, like, please don't ever introduce me like that. That's insulting, right? Like, if you introduce me, though, as a founding GP of a new and innovative idea, like, that's for me. I'm an entrepreneur still. That was the kind of realization between 08 and 9 and 10 that, yeah, if I could start from a blank sheet of paper and start a new kind of fund, that would be up my alley. But joining an existing fund, that wouldn't suit my personality.
Got it. And so you had an insight about the post-seed phase. And can you talk a little bit about what characterizes that phase?
So it was just a simple math problem, and it was something anybody with an hour of work could have looked at. If you have 20 or 40 seed funds, and that goes from 20 or 40 to 200, that's what we modeled. We guessed it would go to 200. And you have the same number of Series A funds, you would have a lot of promising companies that essentially didn't raise enough money from the seed ecosystem. And you wouldn't want to kill them because a lot of them were going to turn out to be winners. They just needed another year. So you raised $2 million in seed because it was cheap and easy instead of $5 million in Series A. Well, what happened if you needed the other two? And so we just penciled it out. We said, well, what if we went into business to identify those companies that need the extra $2 million, even though it got cheap to get the first two? And sure enough, a lot of these companies existed. Everything from a FanDuel to an Ipsy to now in our later portfolio, an Ocrolus, a Grove, consumer companies, enterprise companies. And the knock on our model in the early days was, yeah, Paul, that's a cute idea, but there won't be any winners. All the winners will be identified quickly, and you'll pick among the losers. I'm like, no, just because you raised $1 million or $2 million less than you should have doesn't make you a loser. Actually, you might be the most successful company in the whole batch. I'm happy to give you another $1 million or $2 million on the backside, having seen the whole first to $2 million get spent. Like, wait a minute, I think I might get the better deal. And that was the bet. The bet was we would have as many aces in our deck as the ones that immediately went to Series A. And now 10 years in, with a lot of $1 billion outcomes, people are like, yeah, that part of the deck's got a lot of good cards in it too.
And is that gap in post-seed still existent, or how have the ratios changed with 1,000?
It's actually, right, and great question. It's worse now than we ever predicted. When you model it going to 200 funds in steady state, and it went to 1,000 funds, the democratization of the front end of the funnel, which I think is one of the most awesome things that's happened in the past decade. More people got to become entrepreneurs, more different kinds of people, more businesses that no one said were going to be venture businesses. Founders who didn't go to the fancy schools, who grew up in Cincinnati and started their companies in Orlando, they started getting money because seed funds got created in Orlando and in Cincinnati. So we overshot by such a huge margin by going to over 1,000 that more and more companies were able to raise seed but not get to Series A. So the gap is maybe an order of magnitude bigger than we predicted, penciling it out in Mike's office all those years ago.
Amazing. So now, fast forward to Fund 5 and $130 million fund. And what is the definition of the company you're looking for? Who should come talk to you?
Amazingly, it hasn't changed much in 10 years. The numbers are slightly different, but they're pretty similar. A company that needs to see me has raised $3-ish million in seed, is somewhere between 10 and 20 people, is making about $1 million a year, is burning about 100 to 200,000, and went to the Series A firms and they said, you know, what you're doing is pretty cool, but show me 2 more quarters of growth like that and then I'll write you a big check. And if you're a CEO and you're hearing this, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're sitting there, you're like, I don't get it. I'm so close, but yet I'm so far away. Why does no one want to get me another $3 million? It's because the seed funds want to write first checks and Series A funds want to write big checks. So what happens if you need another small check? There is a persistent ongoing gap for exactly these kinds of companies. And we are amazed that we still have so few co-investors. If there's one thing I lament, it's that 10 years in, so few people still do what we do, which in general, as a competitive landscape thing, you'd be like, that's awesome. But having a couple more co-investors would probably be a good thing.
Got it. So in the case that you're funding a founder in a $3 million post-seed round, generally, are you alone or is it with angels, or how do you think about your average ticket size maybe?
So we'll end up writing, say it's a $4 million round. So it's ticked up a bit. So now our average round is more like 4 instead of 3. We'll write a $2.5 million check into that $4 million round. And the other $1.5 million better come from your insiders, or we know what they think about the company. So it tends to be us as the lead, catalyzing the insiders to double down because they like it. They know it's a long-term winner, but need some extra money. We would love it to maybe sometimes do bigger $5 million rounds, 2 from us, 2 from a third party, and $1 million from the insiders. But quite honestly, we rarely have co-investors. We will sometimes get a strategic, a Salesforce, a Comcast have been common co-investors, but traditional other venture funds are rarely our co-investors.
Interesting. And do you take a board seat?
We try not to. And the reason is not because we don't care about governance. It's we want to go in there and coach the CEO. We want to be the trusted advisor to the CEO. We want the 2 a.m. phone call. And by the way, if it's a company that has a well-formed seed syndicate, they have a board that's already functioning. They have an investor seat, they have a CEO seat, they have the common seat. I don't need to touch that. Let me come in and be a value-added observer. Let me pour some gas on the now expanding sales, whether it's a funnel or a direct-to-consumer company, and let me coach up the CEO as they hire the rest of the management team. We found that to be a very, very powerful formula. Sometimes we have to go on the board because the board was poorly formed in the prior round, but that's not our preference.
Got it. And you've mentioned that you look for companies that are far afield and misunderstood.
Yes.
Say more.
We love our off by ones. And when we say off by one, so by stage, post-seed, you're off by 1. By category, you're Stu and you're doing Grove Collaborative. You're doing e-commerce in 2016 when Amazon's going to kill everybody. Nope. Sorry. I don't care that you're from a fancy school in San Francisco. You're in the wrong category. That's another off by 1. Off by 1's another one. FanDuel from Fund 1. A husband and wife founding team, Edinburgh, Scotland. Well, you can imagine that wasn't a real good check the box for the founder background. And then of course, finally, geography. Plenty of our companies are in places like Cincinnati or Seattle. And so either by stage, by background, by category, or by geography, you are easily overlooked by the venture ecosystem. Come see us, have a big chip on your shoulder, and we're going to love you.
And you also say you dive deeper into data than most funds in order to unearth hidden gems. What's that about?
That's right. And by the way, that's what we're so excited. Anne Dwane joined us. She was our data consultant before she became our general partner. We just hired her. A tremendous asset because there's a little bit of art and science to what we do. If you want to find an unloved gem, you got to actually crunch a lot of data. You can't just do that on pure gut. If you're getting cold emails from LinkedIn from companies in Seattle, you better have a way to quickly triage the data. And by the way, we do that. We look at companies that are cold emails on LinkedIn from Seattle. You don't need a warm introduction to Bullpen for us to take you seriously. Be an entrepreneur with a business that's doing $1 million or so in revenue. We're going to take a look. And I don't care where you went to school or who your dad was or how you got introduced to me. And that's what we've gotten very good at. And Anne is really taking it to the next level.
Well, congratulations.
Run your business on. Send us the deck. We'll tell you in a week if this is a business we think we can invest in because we have built a really good analytics infrastructure for identifying these unloved gems.
Super. Well, congratulations on hiring Anne. And you have said she's a data scientist, but not a data dogmatist.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you just only, and by the way, I'm built the same way. I'm a PhD dropped out in high performance computing and predictive modeling. So I'm a data geek just like Anne. She did her PhD work at Harvard and all this same kind of stuff. But what you learn from Rich Melman, who we view as our emotive partner at the fund, sometimes a business either is going to work or not work. As he says, it's the physics of the situation. And he'll walk into a meeting and goes, Paul, the data says this, but that's never going to work. Or the data says this, and it has to happen. And so if you become too dogmatic and say that the data tells you the whole story, that's how I can guarantee you'll drive the car off the cliff. The art must meet the science. There has to be a creative, artistic judgment in the data that you look at. And getting that blend right is the magic of Bullpen. Having the emotive person like Rich, the data person like me and Anne, all in the same meeting, we think that's where the real magic happens.
Great. And what's the right time for a company to pitch you?
When you are banging your head against the wall because you need $2 to $3 million more and no one takes you seriously, that's when you need to come see us. By the way, you don't need to come see us 6 months in advance to create a relationship with us. We don't need that. But we did deals before COVID on Zooms with founding teams that we literally, in a week or two, all remotely. Spot Hero, our deal in Chicago, one of the leaders in on-demand parking, obviously had a tough year because of COVID, positioned well for great growth in 2021 because gained market share. We had to do that deal all on Zoom. And I remember someone saying, Paul, you've never met the founder. Are you really going to do that? I can't tell you how valuable it was to have one under our belt like that when 2021 rolled around. Because we had muscle memory for, you have to make a quick decision. You're not going to be able to visit the office. You have until Friday, go. And yes, we had more time in 2021, but it's really important that we had done deals like that. So when COVID came around and you couldn't do the office visit, which by the way, I still love, we were not afraid to do it, where I think a lot of other firms were like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
Right. And do you have any advice for companies that are pitching you?
Numbers and data. Okay. Don't show me a product demo. Don't give me the fancy story. Don't tell me where you went to school. Put up the Excel spreadsheet of how you're running the company for the next 6 months. I'm either going to look at cell 23 and say bullshit or not. And that's our investment process. So a lot of CEOs find our process a little bit jarring because it's the opposite of most firms. Most firms, who are you? Where are you from? What's your vision of the future? Well, look, your seed fund has already told me you're interesting, right? You have money from Compliment at first round. Okay, check that box. Show me how you're going to turn the crank. I want to see column 26 2 quarters from now. Do I believe that number? Yes or no? So our process is literally in the muck, in the weeds of the operating plan. And if you don't know your operating plan, please don't call us because you're going to get your butt kicked in a meeting at our office.
And how do you think about advising founders for Series A? Because some people say the goalposts are shifting for Series A. How do you think about that?
Absolutely. The milestones keep getting higher. As the Series A funds get bigger and their checks get larger, the milestones keep getting further and further out. And so training our CEOs for what is needed for that next round is a big part of the boot camp we put them through. So it's also why we like to be the CEO advisor, not the board member. Let me tell you what you need to do to play this game. Let me show you how to perfect your pitch. And oh, by the way, you came in and pitched us on all this number stuff. The next investor is going to want to hear all that vision and product demo stuff. So let's go do that now. But you didn't need that for us.
Great. And are there rules of thumb that founders should have in mind for Series A, or is that a dangerous trap to fall into, is try to meet some heuristics for A?
Oh, no, I think some heuristics are necessary, but they're by no means prescriptive. But if you don't have some sense of where the goalposts are, you have no idea if you're in the ballpark. So what we tell our founders is let's say you're an enterprise software company. You come in to see us, you're at $1 million run rate. You had 2 quarters of really great growth. You're at 2 salespeople. You want to go to 12. I want to help you go from 2 salespeople to 12. I want you to go from $1 million in revenue to $5 million in revenue over the next 18 months. Because if you grow 3x a year and you kind of go from 2 to 12 people, I know there's going to be a lot of bidders on the backside. Because if you're growing that fast and you're at least a 5 million run rate and you got a sales team of 12, almost everybody who's an enterprise SaaS investor is going to take you seriously. And sure, they might do it at 4, or they might want to wait till 8. But I've given you enough guidance that you know how to run the company for the next 18 months.
And do Series A funds look at a company that's done, say, a seed and a pre-seed and a post-seed differently than other companies, or no? Do you feel like they're looking at all these, just what is the opportunity in front of them, and it doesn't matter as much the cap table history of a company?
It doesn't now. It did 10 years ago. when we were doing our little trick in 10 and 11 and 12, it was weird. Well, was this, again, is it kind of a bridge or is it an unloved gem? And we're like, no, guys, this is an unloved gem. It just needed a little more time. This is not a 6-month bridge to nowhere, which is a peer. But once we got good at that and the messaging around it, and once we had round trip entrepreneurs who were telling the story that the bullpen round was the building scaling round of the company, then the Series A investors are like, hey, I don't care that they did a pre-seed, a seed, and a post-seed. Doesn't matter. There's $8 million in the company. They got to $5 million in revenue. Awesome. I don't care that they did 3 or 5 rounds. It is a very, very different ecosystem now, 10 years later. In the early days, there was some weird signaling, but not anymore. It's how much money did you raise to get to where you need? Oh, you did it in that many rounds? Who cares?
And do you have any data? Because I feel like I've seen this in the industry on what % of companies do a post-seed now. It's really high. And I guess it also depends how you define, because some people are doing $5 million A's and some people would say that's not an A in 2020. But
that's right. So, and there is a bit of a garbage in, garbage out to that data, unfortunately, because I'll tell you this. We are in general the third institutional round in the company because there was $500,000 in friends and family, a $2 to $3 million seed round, and we're actually the third round. But wait a minute, what happened if you had a set of notes in between? Am I the fourth round? And so am I then the post-seed round and the notes were the seed round? Wait a minute, you did 2 sets of notes and they converted into my round. Are all 3 of those rounds the post-seed round? So there really is a hard accounting problem when you look at the data sets to say that was the A, that was the B, that was the C, that was the A, especially when so many founders are essentially doing this rolling close process in the early stages of the company.
Right. And it may be more common. I think it's really interesting because I was raised at a time when we were advised to say only raise as much as you need to, with a little buffer, to get to the next inflection point in value. And potentially, because you're doing up rounds with, in many cases, right, no, virtually all cases, right, from the seed round, this is actually a great strategy for founders, right? Raise more at a higher cap or valuation.
And that's actually, I really an insightful question. It was one of the big issues with the thing. If we were going to do down rounds and sidewards rounds and crush the founders, would founders come out and go, the bullpen round was the most important round I did in the company. They believed in me. So we knew that there would be this sweet spot where there was a nice markup, but plenty of room left for the A fund to come in and write their big check. Getting that math right was really what we were doing on the board at Mike Maple's office all those years ago. We're like, there's room in between because the seed is getting done at 6 or 8. The post seed's getting done at 12 or 15. But the Series A fund wants to put 20 in on 65. Wow, there's a lot of room in there.
It's great. You've had a lot of experience in your career hiring, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your hiring tips, including avoiding front runners.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. Front runners are dangerous. I don't know if me or Bill Campbell or someone in the Kleiner-Perkins orbit coined that phrase. I don't remember exactly where it came from, but it happened to me at Aggregate Knowledge. Aggregate Knowledge was the hottest thing in the world, 06 and 07. Again, could do no wrong. All the people who showed up to interview, they had done their 4 years at Google. They were ready to do their next 4 years at the next hottest startup in town. And we were it. And you know what? We stubbed our toe and they hit the door. And they were out quicker than I could blink. And I had never experienced that in my career. I had never worked with this class of people who were, I'm going to go from hit startup to hit startup, and you will pay me a lot and give me a lot of stock, and my resume will be 8 companies that I was at the right time for. And Bill Campbell and I, we would have these conversations about, yeah, Martino, you got trouble. You got all these front runners when you were hot shit, and now you're not. What are you going to do? And it is really actually a hard problem to deal with because you do need some of that DNA, some of that been there, done that, really early at a Google or a Facebook, early phases of scaling. But if you get too many of them because you're a kid in a candy store and you can hire them all, which is what we made the mistake of doing at Aggregate Knowledge, if it's not all lollipops and gumdrops, they're going to go to the next company because that's their MO. And so a good balance of front runners and more, I don't know what a non-front runner is called. That's what we needed to have done. And it's advice I give to my companies. You better have people who believe in the vision and are going to stick with you through good and bad times, as well as kind of plug and play mercenaries, which your front runner is.
And how do you screen for that in interviewing?
I'm not sure I know. I've got a couple things I look for. There's a certain resume sequence that kind of makes you nervous. And it's, right when the 4-year vesting cliff ended, you were out at the last 2. Okay, got it. So that's a hint, maybe. And by the way, that's by no means a definite, but that's the kind of thing you look at and go, oh, this person sticks around 3 to 4 years, goes to the next one. It's all blue chip investors. Okay, where was the risk actually? And then you start asking questions about, okay, tell me what your risk profile is like. You say you're an early stage startup person. Tell me a time when, the CEO came in and said the funding fell apart, and how did you respond? And if the answer is, well, that's never happened to me and I'd be out, well, they probably told you.
Amazing. And you're obviously a continuous learner. You're an innovator. How do you keep up in today's world? How do you continue learning? There's a lot of sources. There's a lot of data out there. What's your go-to?
Well, so I think on the data sources side, there really are. It's such an awesome time to be an entrepreneur. I started my first company. There was no internet, right? I'm sitting in my bedroom in suburban Philadelphia. I'm trying to figure out how to start a company. There's these thing called bulletin board networks, right? I'm logging on to CompuServe to find out about how to start a company. All you entrepreneurs now who are starting your first company, how lucky are you that you can read Fred Wilson's blog? You can look at Matt Otko's Twitter. I mean, it's just amazing, all the resources. You can read Randy Komisar's book, Getting to Plan B. So that side is awesome, and you don't need any help from me. But I think the place where my entrepreneurs need my help is I got to stay sharp. If I am just now a bunch of platitudes, because I have histories from 02 with Pincus and 08 with Komisar and 08 with 10 with Bill Campbell, what good am I a decade later? So I have stayed sharp. I started a film company a few years ago. I actually had a film released into the theaters a year ago. I'm working on a new sports betting venue, which is half sports betting venue, half casino. And so I've told my limited partners, I'm going to continue to stay in some small portion of my time as chairman of these kind of endeavors, because I got to stay sharp. If I'm not at the front lines of solving entrepreneurial endeavors, I think the half-life of my knowledge just is going away. And making sure every year I got my hands in a new thing that I'm a part founder of, or I'm a chairman of, absolutely I need to do that. Because without that, I don't think I get to serve my CEOs the right way.
Super. And last question, because there's a lot of emerging managers that listened to this podcast as well. How would you advise somebody who's thinking about starting a fund, whether it's a rolling fund or some a venture fund?
Main thing is get into business and absolutely fake it until you make it here. And I don't mean bullshit people. I mean, do your first deal, beg, borrow, and steal. Do it as an SPV. Do it on AngelList as a syndicate. Do 3 deals as a syndicate. Have one anchor investor do 2 deals with you. I know a lot of emerging managers like, look, I'm doing a $100 million fund. I'm not going to do a deal until I do my $50 million first close. Well, geez, if I did that, I would still be raising my first fund. It would be 10 years later, and I would still be searching for enough money to get to my $50 million fund. We did $8 million in a rolling first close. We did deals as though we were a $100 million fund when we had $8 million that we didn't really even know if we had $8 million. A couple of those people, I was nervous that they'd wire the checks. So you gotta kind of go into business, and the old school 50% in the first close up against the target. Sure, that applies to some small number of managers. But if you really want to be an entrepreneurially minded first-time manager, you better act like you're in business and do it on small money the way that your startup companies are doing it.
Great advice. And any other things I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, no, this has been great. I really appreciate the trip down memory lane we got to do here, because it is important, especially in an environment like this in 2020, where no one had COVID on their scorecard for what would happen in 20. At the end of 2019, anybody who had 2020 is, sure, pandemic's going to shut us down. Okay, you win life because you got that. But we did go through the tech bust of 2002. We went through, 01, 02. We went through 9/11. We went through the 08, 09 debacle. And you know what? The third time you see the debacle, you have a set of muscle memory about how not to lose your cool when everything is crazy around you. And so the combination of experience from seeing it before with some cool hands applying it to the current time frame, as I've said in other interviews, hey, entrepreneurs, you're up. This is your 9/11. This is your debacle. You got to figure it out. People like me are here to help, but you got to figure it out.
Good words to live by. You're up. And on that really inspiring note, Paul, thank you so much for making time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at villageglobal.vc.